happening.
Check.
Conservation, watersheds and down to shoreline, it would make sense.
Testing 1, 2 works.
already reporting this.
It's 5 o'clock. I will call the meeting to order. Let the record show that all the board members are here. Commissioner Porter is absent. Jerry will be gone tonight. He had I believe he's the president of Stepping Stones or one of those organizations, and he had a meeting tonight and he needed to be at that meeting. So he will not be here tonight. Approval of the agenda and the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Turn your mic on, please. A motion by Tack and second by Zahn to approve the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. One of the things I would like to do is I'd just like to switch the educational component with the recognition of visitors around. I know Chase has children up in his office, and I think I'd like to honor that and be respectful of that. So if nobody has any major objection to that, we'll do it that way.
We'll have public comment then after.
We'll start with public comment right after Chase and Ann get done with their comments. All right, going to the educational and informational speakers. This is something that we've, for those of it in the audience that we've been striving to do this year, is to have at meetings to take a half an hour and bring in speakers on a variety of different topics to educate us and the public as to some of the issues that we're facing. All of us, we're not professional conservationists. This is something that we do in our free time, and speaking for myself, I'm always looking for more information. So one of the ways to do that is to bring people in. And this month we have Chase Cummings, who is our Dunn County conservationist, and you're the program director for, or head of. Chase can introduce himself and now I had it in my mind. Woodardzik. And she is part of zoning and planning administrator. And there was a couple of questions that was submitted to me from the board on zoning. So both Ann and Chase are here to speak to that. So with that in mind, I'm going to just kind of turn it over to you, Chase.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks everyone for having us. Appreciate the willingness to have us come in and speak on some of our programs and what we do at the county. So as Al said, my name is Chase Cummings. I'm the county conservationist. I am one of 3 directors that manage the environmental services department for Dunn County. And Wodarczyk to my right here is one of those co-managers with me. The other one is Tom Carlson, which is a county surveyor. So within the environmental services department, we have 3 divisions: land and water conservation division, planning and land use, and then survey. So tonight we'll try to cover a little bit of what my division as far as land and water conservation does, particularly as it relates to Tainter Lake, and maybe the reason why you're all here. And then as well as kind of turn it over to Ann to talk about shoreline ordinances and some of the programming and I guess the administration type things that we have here at the county regarding Tainter Lake and that aspect. So right now our oversight committee within the county board is the subcommittee of the Planning, Resource and Development Committee. That committee oversees all of our divisions, including the Register of Deeds as well. The PR&D committee also serves as a land conservation committee on certain matters. And that's important because for state statute chapter 92, that is the law that says every county must have a land conservation committee, and that committee must act in the best interests of land and water resources, soil and water resources, whatever the mainly local priorities are regarding land and water. So within that authority, then the Land Conservation Committee has the ability to hire staff to implement their work. And that's where I come in to represent the land and water conservation side of it. Shoreline zoning, planning and land use survey, that's all a little bit different. Different statutes regulate the requirements of that. But particularly the Land Conservation Committee is important to land and water conservation. So our work is really revolves around a land and water resource management plan that's developed at the county level with input from citizens. That plan is usually revised every 10 years. The next time that plan is up for revision will be in 2026. So I'll be starting that revision in the next couple of years. Tainter Lake Rehabilitation District is a key partner and component in that next plan update, as well as any other organization that has interest in land and water resources in the county and any citizen that has interest as well. That land and water resource management plan should be reflective of the priorities that we have for land and water in the county. And then it also can spill into other planning documents that the county has to do, such as farmland preservation planning, any comprehensive planning. All of those kind of blend together on certain aspects and try to, I guess, work off of each other. So Al provided a few questions that the board might have had, so I'll try to address those in the rest of my comments here. But one of the main questions is how are we related and work with Tainter Lake, and what's that relationship like other than just the lake being in the county? And I would say through our land and water resource management plan that was developed in 2006 and in years prior, it's always been looking at a watershed approach to conservation. That's typically how the state has their programs set up. They look at watersheds and how those watersheds affect any particular body of water, such as this river, stream, lake. As it pertains to Tainter Lake and Monoman for that matter, and the whole Red Cedar Basin watershed, our land and water resource management plan is set up in a way that helps prioritize certain parts of the county where we can focus our work. It's also reflective in planning documents and work that's been done on the state level from a watershed management plan for the Red Cedar Basin itself. And that's also known as a TMDL, or total maximum daily load, which basically sets phosphorus loading requirements or standards for certain bodies of water based on their potential impairment, and then tries to put an implementation plan in behind that to try to work within the watershed to address those concerns. Our work typically is outside and above the ordinary high water mark of any lake. Once you get below the ordinary high water mark, that's where the Department of Natural Resources has more authority and more jurisdiction. They also have jurisdiction above the ordinary high water mark in some of our programs, but that's typically where the state relies on the counties to implement some of their state performance standards, particularly as it pertains to agriculture, but then also just general land and water, soil conservation, runoff control, things that may contribute to surface water contamination. And then those obviously flows into impoundments such as Tainter and Monoman. Some of the ways that we are implementing conservation in the county is through primarily our agricultural performance standards and manure storage and management ordinance. So a long name for what used to be just considered a manure storage ordinance. So primarily working with farmers that have livestock that have storage or want to put storage in to store manure, and then managing or working with them to manage those structures in a proper way, you could say. That ordinance was updated in 2021 to include a state ag performance standards and prohibitions for agriculture. Those are prohibitions and standards that have been in place since 2002 in the state. And it's always been under the understanding and somewhat of a memorandum of understanding with the state that the implementation side of those ag performance standards that the state legislature put in place in 2002 is going to be implemented by the counties and the staff within counties. That didn't come with any enforcement standards or any enforcement arm. Any enforcement of those standards would come from Department of Natural Resources. In 2021, the county board adopted those standards into ordinance, which then gives a little bit more authority to the local staff, my department, as well as the county board to make some decisions on how we manage agriculture in the state. Now, with that said, there's limitations on what the county can and can't do. They're limited by restrictions and authorities granted to the county by state legislature. Townships tend to have a little bit more authority in certain areas. Counties are kind of caught in the middle, and that's where we find ourselves almost on a daily basis, is in the middle of trying to solve all kinds of different problems. So we have an ordinance that basically says, and it's state administrative code that says all farmers must have a nutrient management plan. If they're applying nutrients of any kind, whether that's manure or commercial fertilizer, they must have soil erosion that meets tolerable soil loss. And then there's a whole suite of practices regarding the handling of manure. I say all that because that is where we spend a lot of our time, is working with probably some of the larger, the largest land use within our portion of the watershed. I think 40% of the entire Red Cedar watershed is forest land. And then that breaks down into, I think it's 27%, farmland as far as row crops. Another 14% or 15% is in pasture or hay, which may be coming in and out of rotation. So we spend a lot of our time working with agricultural producers. That's not to say we don't work with individual landowners from time to time on any other type of erosion, stormwater, other issues like that. Some of the ways that we work to address phosphorus particularly, and that's probably the primary nutrient of concern that has been talked about for the most for Tainter Lake, is we are a hub for grant funds to be passed through from the state or federal government. So we right now we have cost share funds that come in from the state for conservation practices and nutrient management planning. So when those rules came into effect in 2002, those ag performance standards, and it's also subject to our county ordinance, we cannot enforce anything on anyone who has existing cropland or existing farms without offering cost share first. So we have to offer cost share in many instances at a rate of roughly 70%. The landowner doesn't necessarily have to take that cost share, but we have to offer it. And if they need cost share to upgrade or make improvements, then we have to find that money. Right now, we get about $60,000 a year in bond money, which is hard practice money for building such as grade stabilization structures. So earthen dams that you might see out in the watershed, stream bank restoration work, building grass waterways to prevent erosion, looking into manure storage type facilities and things like that to prevent any runoff from there. We get another approximately $28,000 a year to offer cost share for nutrient management planning. So that's making sure landowners are, not in today's world with the price of fertilizer, not many people are intentionally wasting nutrients, but we have to make sure that we have a plan in place to know that we're documenting it. So we have cost share money that's available for that. And I'll tell you right now, there's never enough cost share money to meet the demand. So that's just a constant challenge that we're dealing with. A few other things that we're working on, that we work through, is notices of discharge, targeted runoff management grants. Those grants come down through the state of Wisconsin, through Department of Natural Resources for basically enforcement or non-compliance of certain sites. So for example, we have close to $800,000 grant we have right now for notice of discharge that's going to one farm to help them upgrade to prevent what was overtopping and really poor management or lack of management or inability to manage just the system where we would having runoff that was going to tributaries directly to the Red Cedar River. So we're a hub to try to get some of those funds in to help those landowners out within that watershed. Another one is MDV, or multi-discharger variance, and water quality trading. So when we talk about phosphorus discharge and loading of a surface water body, we think of two main sources. Non-point source pollution, and that's what I've just been talking about, is stuff that's kind of running off the land. There's not necessarily a pipe per se. And then there's point source pollution, and that's what we're talking about: wastewater treatment plants, cheese plants, things that have a pipe that may discharge directly to surface water. In those instances, the state of Wisconsin is requiring in permit renewals for those point sources to reduce their phosphorus discharge to the water body. And in doing so, they have developed a system where let's take, for example, a village that may have a wastewater treatment plant that cannot afford a $3 or $4 or $5 million brick and mortar improvement to their wastewater treatment plant. Through this adaptive management process, as it's called, we can take some of those funds and redirect them within the watershed and try to get the same pounds of phosphorus reduction within the watershed through non-point sources as we would get through a brick and mortar infrastructure type on a point source. So we work with that to try to be that bridge between a municipality and the rural landowners and try to jockey those funds around to get the ultimate goal is a phosphorus reduction within the watershed. We have a couple other programs, Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, that's looking at setting aside land in 15-year agreements or in perpetuity to always be in a vegetative state where it's not, not being cropped basically. So there's less risk for erosion, provide more filtering from other cropland, and to protect those potentially eroding stream banks. Farmland preservation. So there's a farmland preservation program in the state since the late 1970s. It's been rehauled in 2009. And that is where Ann and I's world kind of cross a little bit with comprehensive planning and zoning and farmland preservation. So if a county, a municipality such as a township says, hey, we want to maintain the rural character of the community, we like it the way it is, we want to preserve our ag land, there's a program that can help incentivize that. So landowners, if they're in certain areas of the county, can sign up, enroll their land in a farmland preservation agreement. If they meet certain soil and water conservation standards, so going back to the ag performance standards I talked about, meeting tolerable soil loss, nutrient management planning, all those things, then they're eligible for a tax credit. They file that tax credit based on their property, but it's an income tax credit that they can file. So we administer kind of the conservation side of that and the bridge between Department of Revenue at the state and the local landowner. We're not filing the taxes for those individuals, but we're a resource there. We also have 2 farmer-led watershed groups within the county. Those are groups, one is in the Hay River kind of branch of the Red Cedar River. The other one is known as the Red Cedar Conservation Farmers, and they're kind of north of Colfax, town of Grant, town of Sand Creek. That is a program that was actually started in the 4-county area here of Pierce, St. Croix, Polk, and Dunn County in around 2012 as a pilot program for the state. And so we were on the ground floor with that, and that has taken off to where there's about $1 million set aside in the state budget every year for supporting farmer-led watershed efforts. And right now, I think the total request far exceeded the availability of funds. But the importance there is that working with landowners, working with farmers in the landscape, somewhat more on their terms as to they can come up with the ideas, they can find out what best fits for them, a little bit more inviting than me coming out and say, hey, you need to do this. We don't like to take that approach anyway. We want to take a more of a voluntary approach. But if enforcement is needed or a little bit stronger hand is needed, then we have to play that role too, where the farmer-led watershed groups can be in a little bit more control of how they can manage their land. It is not a variance to or an exception to following the state performance standards, but it is a way for them to have some incentivized money to try some new things. So for example, if no one's ever tried no-till or cover crops before to try to keep soil in place, through these programs, they can be receiving incentive payment on an annual basis or for the grant cycle to try something new with the hope that they will learn, find out what works for them. They can try to implement some best management practices on the landscape to reduce that runoff. A few other things that we get involved with is we have a grant source of funds that's known as conservation aid funds. And those funds typically come through come to the county in a 50% match grant with the Department of Natural Resources. So we get $2,325 from the state, and we match that. The county budget matches that. So we have, $4,650 every year to work with on a project. Those projects have to be related to some sort of conservation practice that is supportive of of the public. So public access, boat landings, stream bank restoration work, things that would when I say stream bank restoration work, I say that in a sense of like there's public fishing access available to that. So we have some little bit of funds that come through there. I think the other thing that is probably particular interest to Tainter Lake is we also are a pass-through kind of sign off on a source of grant funds that comes from the state for aquatic invasive species work. It's not a lot. We get about just over $11,000 that we pass through to Beaver Creek Reserve in Eau Claire area. And they have a person that is basically managing about 9 different counties for their aquatic invasive species work. And so all the counties that are involved pass that money through to support a position. That position can work directly with lake associations, lake districts to try to work on any needs that you might have. So we don't directly, as I mentioned before, we don't directly work within the lake itself typically, but we do have some ability to kind of shuffle some funds and some programs, make some accessibility for that. One other thing that Al had mentioned too is just to touch on is maybe many of you in the room participated in this, but the county board allocated $175,000 in ARPA money. So kind of the federal money that came down following the COVID pandemic. And we were able to channel that money into a water quality monitoring program, particularly related to groundwater quality. So everything I've said so far is related to surface water, but we also have a strong interest and there's a strong level of concern, especially from citizens, for groundwater quality as well. So we were the ones that kind of led the force on collecting almost 1,000 samples over the summer from private wells. And we're in the process of handling that data right now. So I can just speak on, we collected samples from 973 wells over 8 weeks. And we tested a comprehensive homeowners kit. So that included things, we didn't collect bacteria, but things such as nitrate, a metals package. We even looked into a trizine scan. So looking at breakdown from any herbicides that are used in the zine family. So you think of atrazine, there's breakdown chemicals or breakdown of those components that maybe make their way to groundwater. And we tested for those as well. Right now, nitrate results, just as a high level, averaged about 4.1 parts per million across the county. And a safe drinking water standard right now that's set by EPA in the state is 10 milligrams per liter or parts per million. And that's based on typically for pregnant women or women who may become pregnant, infants, and unborn children due to health effects that can affect those young children in how they may metabolize oxygen in their blood. High nitrates can cause lack of oxygen, and you can probably guess what could happen after that. So that's where the standard is set. But there's also more and more research coming out every day, and the State Department of Health Services has taken a position that long-term exposure of elevated nitrate concentrations in private wells can be have ill health effects for people of all ages. We're talking thyroid, colon cancer, things like that are at higher levels of risk when you have higher nitrates that you consume for longer periods of time. So on average, we're at 4. We're not at 10, so that's good. But we do have areas of the county where I think our highest sample was around 40 parts per million. We have areas of the county, I think right now, kind of the southeastern part of the county. It's a lot of sandier ground. Land use is a variable there. But one thing that's true in every instance is there's so many variables in interpreting these well results that you have to consider the well depth and the well construction of each individual well, the location on the landscape, land use around that, geology, soils, all those things. So we have to be very careful that we don't jump to conclusions and point too many fingers. But the important part of the water monitoring program is to try to establish a baseline and to provide a service to landowners so they can test their well. Right now, about 10% of the wells tested exceed the safe drinking water standard. That's about 113 wells. So not good, but not horrible, and we don't want it to get worse. So that's where then we try to bridge that gap between the impacts on surface water, the impact on groundwater, and how that we can impact the land use and potentially administer the land use in a way through a number of different programs, how that might, I guess, try to stabilize any contamination we have or pollution we have in our surface and groundwater. Certainly we don't want it to get worse. The hope is to make it better, but right now we want to try to just toe the line. One other quick fact was, and that's kind of a hot topic right now too, is PFAS. You've heard that in the news, the forever chemicals. We did do testing for that. We tested every one well in every township, tried to put it at a town hall so we can go back and retest that. 14 of our 22 towns had presence of PFAS in the water. None of them were above the safe health or the health standards. But those health standards and everything we're learning new things all the time. So those standards can change over time. But right now I would say they're very low, but they are present. And that has to do with managing of the land. You think if you listen to the news or read articles, everyone jumps to firefighting foam and nonstick pans as a source of PFAS. And actually it's in almost everything. It's in this carpet, probably Scotch Guard. It's everywhere. So as those things get processed through the system, and I'm going to say the system of a wastewater treatment plant, they can make their way through and then be land applied in areas when those byproducts and biosolids from wastewater treatment plants need to dispose of that. So that's how it's getting into the system. And there's obviously concerns about how that affects public health. So we find ourselves in the mix of all that on a regular basis. One other question was asked, Al asked about, did we test for phosphorus in our groundwater sampling program? And we did. That was not part of the results that went out, but right now it's too early to really draw too many conclusions. We have results from a high of 2.065 milligrams per liter all the way down to 0.25. When you think about a stream, just a natural babbling brook in the backwoods, 0.075 milligrams per liter is kind of the target you want to have for a surface water. Anything above that, you're running into the level of that stream or that water body being impaired. Now, when you get into lakes, that level is higher. When you get into impoundments like Tainter Lake and Monoman, that level is even higher as to when it's considered a problem. Clearly, we have a problem with Monoman and Tainter. I mean, that's why we're probably all have an interest here. So the component of groundwater and the interface between groundwater and surface water, how those combine, is an important one to understand. And right now we're not in a position to really know how the samples that we collected and the results are impacting the surface water. I think again, the sampling that we did is a snapshot in time. It's unique to that particular well, and what we don't know or have yet to find out and will hopefully is groundwater flow directions and the rate that might be moving through. So proximity on the landscape. Right now, I would, in a somewhat of a comparison just to show the level of variation. Think about Lake O'Galley in the southwest part of the county. That is an impaired water body as well. Looking at phosphorus concentration in the wells that we sampled around O'Galley, they were quite low. When you get into looking at the Red Cedar watershed and what comes into Tainter, we have a couple hot spots, but some of the highest concentrations of phosphorus we found in private wells was outside of that watershed, kind of to the south and east. So it is something that should be factored in. How much of a role it plays in the phosphorus loading of Tainter Lake, it's hard to say right now. And I just make that comparison with O'Galley because O'Galley is impaired as well, has algae blooms, and they have low phosphorus in their groundwater. With that, I'm going to kind of shift here a little bit. So I mentioned, a lot of the work that we do especially within the Land and Water Conservation Department is above the ordinary high water mark. within the watershed, working with individual landowners. Anne and her department, her division of our department, tends to work in that same realm. I'll let her explain a lot of that, but I think one of the questions that was asked was shoreline ordinances, shoreline regulations, and kind of the why maybe of that. So with that, I'll let Ann kind of take it from there, and then we'd be probably happy to answer some questions. So.
I have a very squeaky chair, so just heads up, making a lot of noise. So, yeah, I think I was asked here to just kind of explain why shoreline ordinances exist, why they're important, and ways that, citizens can monitor and assist kind of with the enforcement of some of these regulations. So Wisconsin statutes delineate shorelands as areas within 1,000 feet of the ordinary high water mark of navigable lakes, ponds, or flowages, lands within 300 feet or within the floodplain of a navigable river, whichever distance is greater. So these come from state statutes, or I'm sorry, NR 115. This establishes the minimum standards for local ordinances. And then counties are mandated by the state to adopt and enforce development standards for shorelands in the unincorporated areas. So outside of cities or villages. So in Dunn County, towns or townships can opt out of county zoning, but they cannot opt out of shoreline zoning. So this applies to the entire county. So some reasons why shoreline zoning is important. Implementing shoreline zoning helps prevent habitat destruction, erosion, water pollution, preserves wetlands and other sensitive areas that can contribute to overall ecological balance. Water quality preservation, erosion control, unregulated development along shorelines can lead to increased erosion, which in turn can negatively impact water quality and the stability of the shoreline. Scenic beauty and recreation. Zoning regulations can help preserve these qualities by controlling development density, setbacks, and visual impact of structures. They can protect property values. Well-regulated shoreland areas contribute to enhancing property values by ensuring that the development is in harmony with the natural environment. Preserving shoreland functions. Natural shorelines provide important functions like habitat for wildlife, water filtration, and flood control. Shoreline zoning will help ensure that these are preserved and enhanced. The enforcement of shoreline zoning primarily falls under local government authorities. So in Dunn County, that would be the County Planning and Zoning Office, which I'm the head of that department. The Wisconsin DNR provides guidance and oversight, but typically doesn't enforce local zoning directly. They'll get involved in some of the bigger cases if they need to. Citizens can report shoreline zoning violations or suspected violations by contacting the county zoning department. They can provide details about the violation. We want to hear about the location, a description. If you have photographs, that's always helpful for us. Sometimes we can't see a property from, the road, which is really the only place we can look. But as a neighbor, you can kind of see the shoreline or from the lake a little bit easier than us. When you call us, let us know if you want to be anonymous, because we can certainly make sure that can happen. And then, call us and call us to follow up if you see anything new. You can call us and find out if we've taken any action. And if you feel like we're not doing a good job, you can also contact the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and get us to move a little faster. But yeah, I can answer any questions. I just wanted to do a quick summary.
I would just add to, the realities of everything that everyone's probably involved with is just limited capacity and time. There's only so much staff, there's only so much money, there's only so much that we can do. And certainly we try to prioritize our work as things come in. Complaints that come in tend to rise. But then you can only handle so many complaints too. So that's not to deter, because we can't be in every place at all times. So it's not to deter the complaints from coming in, but the realities of just trying to be in all places all at the same time and the expectation for that. I just want to make sure that everyone is realistic in the expectation. And county budgets, whether that comes down from the state or not, usually dictates what that capacity could be. So I guess with that, we can take questions.
Yeah, and a question for you would be, where do we find the county ordinances for shoreline?
So if you go to our main website.
Yep.
There'll be a banner that goes across the screen.
Yep.
One of those buttons says ordinances.
Yep.
You click there, it'll list all the ordinances in Dunn County, and I believe Shoreland is chapter 14.
Okay, so there is one that says specifically chapter 14 and it's
Yep.
specific to our county.
And I'll give you a heads up as well, the Wisconsin DNR is working on a model ordinance. It was supposed to come out already. I don't think they've finished it yet. But once that comes out, we will probably be updating our shoreline zoning ordinance as well to match some of the changes that have happened at the state level.
Okay. A follow-up question to that is, so just to give us an example, what is the most common violation that you're dealing with? Or that you see, or that you think is taking place?
I would say vegetation removal. It's the most common, but also one of the hardest ones to enforce. I think that would definitely, and then just building too close to the shoreline, or, you know, people will construct decks or gazebos or smaller structures without a permit. And they'll happen to be too close to those shoreline setbacks.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Do you guys have any idea how many tons of sand get washed in to Tainter from the Red Cedar or Hay River on an annual basis?
I can't give you that number right now. But I mean, it's just something we could try to figure out. I don't know how accurate it would be without, you know, but you're talking just general bed load.
Yeah, I was watching an interview of a gal who's the president of the Lake Altoona Lake District, and she had some numbers she was rattling off on her, 2-minute news interview.
Sure.
Of how many tons of sand got washed into Lake Altoona every year. So I was wondering if we could find a similar statistic, basically.
Yeah, I can look into that. No, I'm not that familiar with all of Altoona's history, but you know, with them looking closer at some of those issues, they probably were doing a little bit more intense monitoring of it. So, and I'm not sure where we're at on that for the Hay and the Red Cedar, but we can look into it.
Other questions from the board?
Yeah, I have one, Jason. You've got a lot of things going on here as far as taking actions to prevent pollution of Lake Tainter and Manoomin. Fiber-led activities and what have you. Do you have a way of measuring if you're getting results from all these actions?
So right now, there is a gauging station below the dam on the Red Cedar River in Menominee here. That's monitored by Department of Natural Resources on a regular basis. And those numbers are currently showing a decrease in phosphorus. What we typically do, so let's say we are working with a landowner in the watershed to convert 100 acres of tilled field into a no-till field. We have modeling that we can do to estimate what that phosphorus reduction would be. And that modeling is based off of edge of field monitoring that has been done around the state. So we're not necessarily, catching it at the end and, doing that type of level of numbers, but we have some values that we can assign to certain practices based on what we're doing. So right now, through the implementation plan for the Red Cedar Watershed, TMDL, there is reporting that we do every year to say, okay, we installed X number of acres of cover crops, therefore we're estimating that the phosphorus is being reduced by this number of pounds per year. The real reality is basically what that gauging station and any in-lake monitoring would have to tell the story long-term of, is it working or is it not? And right now, over the time period, I forget what the time period is. I don't have the chart in front of me, but it's well over 10 years. That phosphorus level is going down. But that's also consistent across the state in a lot of other water bodies, a lot of other watersheds. So as much as I'd like to say, hey, we're doing a good job, the credit can't all be on, there's no silver bullet to these issues. So we're hoping that it's working, that it's helping, but it's certainly not probably the end all be all answer. The one thing I would say that does not look good is it's what's on the rise is nitrate concentration in the water body. And from what I understand, algae blooms while they might be less frequent, when they do take place, they could be more toxic due to higher levels of nitrate versus phosphorus. So that is something where, how is nitrate and nitrogen getting into the system? How does that look on the landscape? Is that, what's the land use and where do we interact with that? So.
Thank you.
One more, Chase. When the Lake District was formed, Dunn County's first action was to remove their properties from the Lake District. When the Lake District starts working on projects in the water, in front of those properties, how will Dunn County react financially?
I don't know. You'll have to ask them, not me. No, I know what you're saying. Right now, that would be a decision that would be made above me. That's with probably the Land Conservation Committee or the PR&D Committee, all the way up to the county board, ultimately the county board. So the county board made the decision to remove those properties. That's not uncommon. My understanding across the state for Lake District formation is municipalities, public entities remove those properties. I think there's some perspective on taxpayers paying into a county levy and then portions of that levy being used to arguably affect smaller portions of the community, even though it's a lake that not everybody uses, but more than just the people that live on it use it. So that would be a question that would have to be asked to them. As I guess what the specific details of the request would be. Are you willing to contribute something to it? Then that would have to be, that would have to be a decision they would have to make. And I would say that it'd be best to be made in the timing of budget preparation, which is just passed. We're going on the next cycle now. Because if you think about just my budget, I don't know where that would come from. But that would have to be a decision above me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question. How's it going working with the farmers out there? And I know you said there's 2 coalitions that work with them, but on the no-till and the cover crops, and are you seeing any decrease in the use of fertilizers by the farming groups?
Mm-hmm. Depends. You gotta love that answer. It depends on it really can depend on seasonality too. I mean, we have experience working with landowners that have transitioned into a no-till system. Right now, the hot topic is planting green. So they may be in a no-till system. They planted a cover crop in the fall, and in the spring they come in and they no-till in, let's say, beans into a standing rye cover crop. They'll let that rye either grow up or they'll terminate it later. It provides cover, all that sort of thing. Creates, all kinds of benefits for soil health, keeps soil in place. But if you get a drought like we had this year, an untimely drought, those beans are not gonna recoup. So I think it's kind of playing the long game. We are seeing increases in more adoption of certain conservation and soil health practices. I wouldn't say that we're necessarily going backwards. It's only getting better. We do a soil transect survey every year. We have, I'm trying to think, it's over 1,500 points that we go to every year, and we assess crop type, tillage used, cover crops that may be in place, and trying to tabulate all that data, but at least it's somewhat of a trend, somewhat of a representative sample of the county. We can break that down into watersheds, and then we can look at those trends to see how those things are going. And right now I think in the Red Cedar watershed, we're around 28 to 30% is in no-till. So, I mean, I think if you look back probably 10, 15 years ago, we probably weren't even close to that. So I'm encouraged to see that that's improving. As far as nutrient use, there's new technology coming out all the time, new products coming out all the time, and to try to keep up with that is a full-time job for more than one person. But with the price of those products, the price of fertilizer, I think it's fairly safe to say that people are not just going out and putting on twice as much nitrogen as they need. That's not to say that there isn't loss of nitrogen. I mean, corn plant just on its own only uses about 30% of the nitrogen that's applied to it. That's just the nature of the beast. So, we have to try to manage our systems in a way so that what is applied isn't being lost. And that's where the kind of the tightening of the screws is, and we kind of got all the low hanging fruit over the years, and now we're trying to buckle it down even more. So.
Any other questions from the board?
The only thing I had, Chase, I realize now that I've fired some questions at you that are kind of a little outside your wheelhouse there do you know who in the county would have like answers for that type of stuff? I was asking about like the boat landing, a couple things that come up about, potentially having a launch fee and dealing with the landing at Champney Park, which is non-existent at this point. So where would that kind of fall then?
Yeah, so within the county, there's the Facilities and Parks Department. So that department is what manages or administers all the parks in the county, and all those boat landings are county parks. We do get involved in our office. I mentioned those conservation aid funds that we get a little bit of money every year. Like for example, boat dock replacement on Lambs Creek is going to receive some of those funds next year to put in a different, upgrade that dock, or not necessarily upgrade, but replace it. So that's not to say that our department or my division wouldn't necessarily be involved in something that happens at Champney Park. We could potentially be a source of some funds while small. But the decisions and the administration and facilitation of those decision-making on those properties would go through the Facilities and Parks Department and that committee.
Yeah, because I would think that, that might even be out of some of their level of expertise, because you're talking about waterways and different things like that. So there would be decision-making across not only a lot of departments, but also through consultation with like the DNR and other state agencies.
I tried to emphasize a little bit of the ordinary high water mark in my comments earlier, and we work above that. When you get below the ordinary high water mark, that really gets out of our jurisdiction at the county level. So when you think about the sedimentation in front of Champney Park and trying to figure out what to do with that, that's where okay, now someone's got to decide, okay, where is the ordinary high water mark now? That's the kind of, to me, in my head, that's the first question.
Yeah.
And then depending on where that is, then there's some decisions that need to be made of what is allowed and what's not allowed after that. And that, you're correct, that would be going into the state guidance and probably authority and permitting too.
Sure.
No.
Okay.
I have a question for Ann. I think it was about 2012, the county developed a new shoreland ordinance, which is fairly restrictive. A couple of years later, the state took some actions to eliminate all those shoreline ordinances. So the one that you say we have right now, when was that developed?
Most of it is 2017.
Okay.
Maybe there were some changes. I mean, I think there were some changes, like small changes made. If there's a state statute that goes through, usually
Right.
try to catch those. But I know there's a couple things in there that we still haven't changed to update. So we'll be working on that hopefully this winter.
Yeah, I was on the county board when that, and the only reason that we changed it at that time was to match the state changes because ours was no longer permitted in Dunn County at that point, or in the state, because of that superseded the local ordinance.
Right.
So the current shoreline ordinance is no more restrictive than the state guidance. Is that correct?
Correct. So it can't be in some ways. There's some things that we can do, like I think we have some setback regulations like side yards and roadway setbacks that aren't necessarily in state statutes, but they're in ours.
Okay, we're running a little long on this. I'll take two questions from the floor. If somebody in the audience wanted to ask a question, Ann or Chase.
Do you have an idea of the percentage of non-forming phosphorus contributions to point source? Like what that ratio is?
I do. I don't know what it is right now. It's in part of the 9 key element plan, the implementation plan for the TMDL, which was developed in 2015 based on data, much older data. That plan is about to go through some updates, hopefully here in the next couple of years, because it has to. And hopefully we'll have some better data with that. But it's in that plan as to what the source, and I don't have it with me right now, but I could get that.
What's the name of that plan? Is that
The river runs through us.
Yeah, if you Google the river runs through us, you'll get the plan. Because that's how I got it. And it has, I think it's like in the first chapter of what that is, and it lays that out fairly well.
Yeah, that's all housed in UW Extension's website too. So if you just did like UW Extension, Red Cedar River runs through us or something, that plan would come up, and it's in there. All the breakdowns, all the phosphorus loading breakdowns based on land use, point source, non-point, all that's in there.
You had a question?
If someone wanted to revamp their shoreline and the vegetation on that, okay, to get rid of the noxious weeds, things like that. I know that on your site, there's a listing of preferred plants, things like that. Are there partners within the county or within the municipalities that will do grants to help people out there living on the lake to promote getting rid of some of those noxious weeds, to beautify the shoreline, thing like this?
Is there something with NRCS? Can't think of anything off the top of my head.
No, I'm going to talk about it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, not that it comes to mind right now, specifically on that. I mean, some of the bigger players in that realm, one of them is our division and stuff that we might get through the state. So there's potential for some one-off grants from time to time. There's not like a stable grant program right now. The NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, are a federal program. Though that's particularly related to farm bill stuff, and so you have to be adjusted gross income for farm. So unfortunately, there's really not much that I'm aware of right now. There used to be the Lower Chippewa Invasive Partnership within the county. They represented kind of a regional area. It was a local nonprofit that really focused on invasive noxious weeds and had grant funds available that they could get through their nonprofit status. Some from Department of Natural Resources. But that, like many nonprofits, they just kind of fade away. It's still in existence, but there's really not anything stable there at this point. So be careful what I say here, but, you know, if there's a grant process that people find, typically they don't necessarily go directly to a landowner. They have to be funneled through some sort of other entity. And that's where we find ourselves a lot. I'm not asking for another grant to manage, but that would be kind of an avenue for that is, you know, let's say you discover something from, I don't know, the Nature Conservancy or something like that. The Nature Conservancy isn't necessarily going to give you directly a grant. It would have to come through another public entity or something, or nonprofit.
Or us.
I did think of one, sorry. The Healthy Lakes and Rivers, Wisconsin.
Yep.
That one will do individual grants to individual property owners. And there's a lot of information on that website too. I just pulled it up. Some like native plant nurseries and where to find those in your area.
The other thing too is I think that in the future, that's a potential work area for this group also. In that, while the ordinance is, the county had passed an ordinance requiring people to do things. I think another way to get at some of those, a way to affect the lake as individual property owners would be to do some voluntary stuff. And with that voluntary stuff, I know personally, when I started working on my shoreline, there isn't a lot of resources out there to answer your questions. And maybe that is some potential area for this group to expand, but not this year. I mean, we're getting kind of full here, but that is an area that I think as these discussions go on, we're going to find ourselves talking more and more about those kinds of those kinds of things. So it's, stay tuned. I can tell you it's something on my radar, and I'm sure that as we talk about this, it's going to become more apparent on everybody's for erosion and everything else.
Can I just add something too? I just had another thought. We don't have this program right now, but I'd like to see it happen with Dunn County at some point. But St. Croix County has an annual or biannual tree and native plant sale. And they buy them in bulk and they sell them back to the public at a really good rate. They just released their plants that will be available in the spring on their website. I was just looking at it and there's, you can buy bulk, 25 small trees at a time. There's woodland plants, plants that do well in, wetland areas. So if anybody was interested in checking that out, that's another source too.
Good opportunity for us to partner with the county. Is that it? Well, I'd just like to thank both Ann and Chase for coming. It's very informative. I think your comments help frame our discussions and help us being a new entity to be able to find our place in the watershed and what we can impact and what we can do. The other thing is that every time I hear Chase and speak, it's about finding out that, boy, there's a whole lot of other things going on besides just our lake and our property and how we fit into it. And I think that's important to understand what your role is. So with that, thank you. Okay, that was the fun part. Now back to work. All right, the next part is recognition of visitors and visitor comments.
And Ann did mention that these are in the back. There's a bunch back there if anybody wants
Oh, thank you.
some.
And I will once again ask Mr. Zahns to be our parliamentarian. Again, comments, if you would make your comments to the 3-minute mark, we'd appreciate it. It's not that we want to stifle your discussion, but what we want to do is move the meeting along and be effective with our time. So with that, I welcome anybody to come up and make comments about what's on the agenda or in general. turn the mic on, you press the little guy that's got little waves by him and state your name and your address. And who wants to speak first?
Hello, my name is Eric Peterson. I'm new to the area. I moved here about 11 months ago. I have a property on in the Champney Park area, and I feel like, to be honest with you, I'm over my head with a lot of this, but I wanted to just express concerns that I'm sure you've heard before, and I'm not pointing fingers or doing anything. I've sent out close to 100 letters to people on the northern part of the lake from Champney all the way around close to Elk Point, just to try to garner momentum and support for what I feel is a travesty, and with the lake filling in. And again, I don't have the answers. I just want to try to do something to kind of move our neighborhood and the northern part of the lake ahead, as far as just regaining some of our navigability. We don't have it. I mean, we can't even put a canoe in there or a kayak anymore, because basically up to the shoreline, it's so shallow. There's mature trees growing where there once was water, and it is rapid. In the information I sent out, there was a 2-year gap with my neighbor, and I took another picture, and the filling's just scary. And I don't have the answers yet. I'm working on trying to learn more about it. I got a copy of the deed from the Dunn County when they got it from the 5 gun clubs back in '59. I'm trying to educate myself, but I know I got a few more minutes left, but I've contacted our DNR agent. I've contacted our local representative. There's just a lot to work on, I understand, but I think the biggest thing, at least for us on the northern part, we want the green to go away. And I know that's not an easy fix and it's going to take time, but we just want navigable waters. We want to be able to dredge. We want to be able to allow us to enjoy the lake as riparian rights. So state we should. And I don't even know if we're considered a lake or a waterfront home or a lake access home with how far out the fill-in is now. I just got frustrated because I felt like, I don't know, past attempts have happened and people have not either gone on with it or it was too hard. I don't know. I just hope that anybody that's willing to listen, and I know you guys are, I just feel like this is just a travesty. I don't know how else to put it. I don't, and I knew what I was getting myself into when I moved here, but we got piers sitting there that we can't even get a kayak in now. So I'm hoping to look into grants, and I'm talk to our Alex Smith. I think he's the DNR guy, and then Clint Moses is our state rep guy, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I live in Port Washington, Wisconsin, so I'm only here every other weekend, but I wanted to drive up here because I felt like it was important to just let you know, guys know how I feel, and that I would love to just keep the momentum going if there is some momentum, but that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Christopher Gooding, and I recently also moved on Tainter Lake. on the opposite side from Eric. And I knew what I was getting into also. But I have a lot of experience in restoration of streams. I lived in Pierce County for 40 years. And there was a stream that went through my pasture called the Trimble River. And the Trimble River, I grew up on it. And it was going through, it was silting in really bad. And in cooperation with the local Trouts Unlimited group in River Falls, the DNR and myself, we were able to totally redo the stream. Brought in dump truck loads of riprap, totally redid it. Trout population exploded in 2 years. Trout were moving in to spawn in my pasture. There was 10 times as many trout in my stretch as there was downstream that had 3 times the length of stream. So it shows you what restoration can do. And I think we can probably do the same thing with the red cedar. That silt is coming down from the red cedar and from Hay Creek. Okay, why is it coming down? Are banks eroding? I haven't been here long enough to really go up there and see what's going on. You know, we can dredge. That's an easy fix. Well, what's going to happen 5 years down the road? It's going to fill in again. So, you know, dredging is a quick solution, but we need to find out why it's happening. Nugget Lake in Pierce County, you get the Plum Creek that comes into it. Every few years, I forget what it is, but they dredge that where the Plum Creek comes in, they dredge it. And I'm fortunate enough where I'm able to kayak into the lake, but boy, it's a lot of work. I mean, there's areas where the water's pretty shallow, but we need to find out where the sediment's coming from and find a solution for that. I know we got the issue with the bloom, and that's a real tough one there. But I think the erosion one isn't that tough to fix. We need to find the source and we deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chuck, at one point, did you say that you had a map of like the main erosion points on the Red Cedar and Hay River, or am I imagining that? I'm imagining it. Dang it. Hate when that happens.
It was good thoughts, though. There may be one someplace.
I could probably do it with Google Maps.
Hi, I'm Lissa Marsalik. I've been a resident of Tainter Lake for over 22 years, and I was an original member of the Tainter Monoman Lake Improvement Association. So I wasn't at the last meeting, but I saw information in regards that was needed for the buoys and, you know, how that was originally formed. I was involved in all of that, and I have reached out via email. It went unresponded, but I would love to be involved in that, as it wasn't a simple process. And so that was something that the Tainter Monoman Lake Improvement Association handled directly and then took it to the township, and the township didn't originally want involvement in it, but it was basically facilitated by the Lake Improvement Association, taken to the townships, multiple townships, because it had to be not only just the town of Tainter, but it had to be the other 2 on the lake as well. So I do have information in regards to that, and I am pulling out all my old files as well. So if there's involvement, I'd like to be involved. I understand that too. But what I am disappointed is that after reviewing last month's video and things like that, I felt like it's something that was formed like immediately and on the spot. And I know that you can do that. And there was very short notice given to those to attend the meeting as well. And so as a resident of the lake, that makes me leery of how processes might occur in the future for other things as well. So I think that when I saw it posted and other people's responses, that was something that they felt throws a red flag up too. And so for future things as well, it's not just that, but just in general, I think that if you want our trust, then I think that has to be very, very transparent as well. And so giving notices of ad hoc committees and things like that, like there's one on the agenda today, but there wasn't at the last meeting. There was no notice of it. It was just formed at the meeting and things. And that feels like if things happen without proper information, and it wasn't on the agenda previously, but there is for this week or this month for something else. I feel that that can throw red flags up in the future for other things, and I'm not alone in that either. And I think that that raises concerns.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Hang on, I do have one that was sent via our website. And my apologies if I murder this gentleman's name, but his name is Ryan Fundheller. I hope I got that right. And he talks about the no-wake zone. I live in the channel just past the end of the no-wake zone. I just wanted to share my opinion that the no-wake zone does not need to be any bigger. Boats speed past my lake house every day and we don't mind it. In fact, what bothers my family more is the people driving slow and gawking into our windows. Many people like to fish both sides of the lake or go from the sandbar to Jake's, and it already takes forever with the no wake zone we have. Making people go no wake for even longer will just keep people from using the lake because of the inconvenience. Also, there is no proof that a no wake zone will stop erosion.
Okay.
I was just looking at the agenda from last month. And it did say that we were gonna have a discussion and action regarding no wake buoys, but
Yeah.
not specifically about creating a committee, but it did say that there would be discussion and action.
Right.
So just wanted to make sure that I thought that was on the agenda and I was,
Oh, yeah, it was on the agenda. We did not post that we were going to do
specifically a committee, yeah.
That came up as an action of the board at that point. Okay, we all done with comments? Okay, moving on. Just a second here, let me usually screw something up. Commissioner and committee reports and communication. As long as we're on buoys, why don't we start, Jim? You and Pete had your committee meeting and
Pete did not make it.
oh, okay,
He there was a time calendar mix up or something.
okay.
So
It was Al's fault.
Okay,
so I'll post the minutes to the website after they're approved at the next meeting. But we actually had we had 21 people show up for the meeting beyond the committee members. A lot of discussion about unlike the person who sent the email, pretty much all the comments were negative about people speeding past shorelines, and there was a lot of talk about the damage to the shorelines. Had some discussion from Bob, who's been doing the buoy placement for the last couple of years. The town of Tainter purchased the current set of buoys, and they're in kind of disrepair at this point in time and are going to need to be replaced. And we aren't really marking it the way that the DNR and other places say you should mark it, with a couple of buoys at the entrance and a couple at the end and single ones in the middle. The fact that there is no wake zones is not really well documented, like meaning there's nothing on the signage for any of the boat ramps that to watch for the no wake zones. With the another comment was with the expanse of a lot of VRBOs and rental properties in the area. A lot of folks who are not familiar with the lake don't know better to not drive really fast and what have you. And the way the current ordinance is written, the buoys are only to be placed, I think, the beginning of May, or is it March?
May 1st.
May 1st, and they come out September 15th. So it's not marked then, and also the ordinance says that it's only in effect from May 1st to September 15th. So technically, there is no wake ordinance. Though DNR rules state that all that area is no wake anyway, it's just not marked. So so we had a couple of things to talk about for the next meeting, which is more discussion about the placement of buoys, whether or not what the cost would be to replace the buoys, and whether that's something that this body wants to take on, whether we also decide, whether we're going to talk about whether the Lake District is going to be in charge of that ordinance, in which case then we would ask the town to repeal theirs. To look at the GPS coordinates, where they are, and try to include Elk Point in some discussions about some of the conversation as well. So also looking at that right now, this is an ad hoc committee, and for those who aren't familiar with how ad hoc committees work, you create the committee, it does its purpose, and then it ends. And some of the consensus was that probably especially if the buoy, if the Lake District ends up taking over that ordinance, that this would probably, there'd be a recommendation for it to change from an ad hoc to a standing committee at that point, because it would be an ongoing thing. So everything is kind of in discussion. There was some comments online about that, we're gonna go willy-nilly and start creating ordinances like crazy. And I made it really clear at the meeting, and I'll make it clear here as well, that this group and any ad hoc committees do not create new ordinances. We don't create new rules. All of that gets decided at the annual meeting, and everybody that's here and everybody that's a property owner or lives on the lake has a say in that. And we may come up as a group and say, this is a good idea. This is the way we want to do things. And you guys may say, nope, we're not doing that. So all we do is gather information and try to make a determination, and welcome input from anybody that wants to participate as well. And I'm sorry if we didn't give enough input. The action on, we didn't go into that meeting thinking we're going to create an ad hoc committee, but it was left on the agenda as a potential action item. And so that's one of the things that we did. And it's also something that I would say that the buoys probably almost more than the green in the lake are what people talk to me about while I'm at Jake's, or I'm talking to people all the time, and it comes up as a conversation almost at every one of these meetings. So it's something that it wasn't just kind of just sprung. So, but we'd love to have everybody that would like to be a part of it. We can always add in somebody else as a committee member as well. The next meeting will be on November 30th at Pioneer, back in the back area. And we had some complaints that it was at 3 p.m, and that just worked with all of us. So we're gonna have it at 5. So hopefully more people can attend. Well, it was a lot of people there, but 5 o'clock, November 30th at Pioneer. 5 p.m. Put it on your calendar, Pete, and then show it to me so I can make sure it's right.
I will do that.
And don't blame me.
Yes.
No, that was your fault.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, I have a couple of things. First of all, I attended a meeting of the Red Cedar Learning Hub. It's known as Grassland 2.0. Again, that's another organization that's looking at work in the watershed. They're predominantly working with farmers and converting fields into grasslands. and pastures because they, the TMDL or the phosphorus runoff in pastures is significantly less than row crop fields, because it stops the runoff. Now you may ask, so why does the Lake District involved in grassland? Well, one of the things that's going to come down the road, as they are trying to convert more land into pasture, is that they're trying to put cattle on them, and they put cattle on it for a reason, and that is to sell the cattle and for beef. Then one of the things that we can do as a lake district is support the purchase of pastured beef. So we're involved in it because we're the end consumer. And so if we're going to stand up and say, well, it's all about you guys and the phosphorus runoff, well, then we got to be able to stand up and say, well, if you do something, we'll buy your beef. And so they haven't figured this. This is all pie in the sky. Yeah, it's still in the grant stage. They're just talking about this, but our role in that is to be a consumer at the end of that whole process. The other thing is I met with Dr. Tina Lee, and we discussed summer research projects. She has students from all over the country. Every year they do research projects in the watershed, predominantly Monoman Tainter. I thought it would be kind of cool to be able to tap into some of that research and be able to direct some of that. One of the, I know the potentially one of the projects that may happen this year may be centered around what's the motivating factors for doing shoreline restoration and shoreline work and improvements. And so it would be nice to have that data to say, okay, what would it take to get people to do that on a voluntary basis? That's one idea. Another idea that we had talked about is there's a whole lot of data out there. And it's in like 15 different places. So if you wanted to say, well, what is the TMDL, or how do you find the river runs through us? That's in UW Stevens Point. Okay, so you got to go to UW Stevens Point. You got 10 years of research projects from Stout. You have our stuff. You have all this stuff going on, and you could drive yourself nuts trying to find it. It would be nice to have one repository of information. And the other thing I asked is trying to make connections with UW Stout as far as a university in our town with a lot of brain power, and how do we tap into that? So I had those meetings this month. Any questions? Any other comments? Any other communications? Okay, moving on. Treasurer's report. You're up, Grant.
Yeah, pretty simple treasurer's report since our last meeting on October 19th. We had one expense, which was $180, and that was to Menominee High School for renting the auditorium for the annual meeting. And we did have a dividend deposit at the end of the month of October for 32 cents. So we're moving up in the world.
Cooking along.
Our current balance is $3,600.35.
$3,600.35.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I guess I could say too is that I did successfully submit the PC 505 form,
Which is,
for the tax levy.
that's what I figured.
And I emailed it to you guys as a, basically a PDF copy of the receipt, so to speak. So that should get the money that was approved at our last annual meeting coming to us.
Because I saw an email that Doris wanted to see what the status of that was. And so I would imagine that comes through the county then? Is that who you submitted it to or did?
Yeah, no, the PC 505 form is it's on the Department of Revenue, Wisconsin Department of Revenue site, I believe. So you fill that out there. Oh yeah, Chuck's got a copy of it right here. And then basically now, like we've talked about in previous meetings, there's a payment in January, February, and August. Am I remembering that right off the top of my head?
Yeah.
So we're gonna get chunks here. And Tom, I think this is maybe what answers your question or Doris's question about the township of Tainter. Basically this chart shows the town of Menominee, town of Red Cedar, town of Sherman. And then there's equalized values, a percentage, and then the levy amount. So our total that we approved at the annual meeting was 15,731. 14,070 of that is going to come from the town of Tainter. The town of Sherman is going to be 799, Red Cedar 495, and town of Menominee is 364. That's how I understand it.
No, that's the way it works. Good. Okay, so that's all taken care of?
Yep, we should be good to go on that.
Okay, can I have approval of the treasurer's report?
Make a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
Second,
Motion and second to approve the treasurer's report. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
all right,
Right.
Those opposed? Okay, surface water grant application and resolution. I gave or sent out a copy of the actual grant application. I don't know if some of you can open it or not. The opening that PDF is it's a bugger. Half the time filling out that form was figuring out how to work the PDF, and it should not be that hard, but it is. And so you have a copy of the grant application. We've talked about it. This is the third meeting we've talked about it, actually. Nothing has changed on that. The one thing that we do have to approve tonight is the resolution. There was a resolution in there authorizing myself to sign off on the application and sign off on the documentation in the administrative pieces. And the other one would be grant to submit for reimbursement. Obviously, when you work with the state, you spend your own money, and then once you spend your own money, then you apply for reimbursement. And so Grant would have to do that and that resolution gives him the authorization to do that on behalf of us. So with that in mind, could I have approval of the formal approval of the grant and of the resolution? Maybe one of the committee members that helped write it would be good to.
Just make a motion to approve the grant and the authorization resolution.
Yep.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to approve the grant and the authorization resolution. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion carries. I'm gonna flip-flop these next two pieces because instead of talking about the work plan, let's talk about the committees first, because I think the committee impacts the work plan. I think I got the cart before the horse in there. Oh, I forgot something. If I can back up a second. All of you read Jerry's email about the meeting with Xcel Energy and how that went. That went very well. I know I was supposed to be there, but I was on a field trip. So
Different field trip.
yeah, different field trip in a different state. And just so people, this whole conversation with Xcel Energy started with a comment from the audience, and somebody had asked us about a winter drawdown. And I just want to point out that we followed through with this meeting. That wasn't the only reason for this meeting, but one of the reasons for this meeting was to ask about a drawdown. It's impossible to have a drawdown because of the federal licensing of the dam. They get 6 inches of variation. But they also did talk about the project, and just for the public's information, it's a 3-year project. Part of what they ran into some high water this spring and washed away the road, and they've reclaimed 98% of the material that was lost through the flood. And the project, my understanding of the project is that they are going to put in 3 Tainter gates on the dam. So our dam at Cedar Falls will look more like the dam in Menominee. And so it'll have those big gates. I believe, if I understand this correctly, the purpose of that is better control of the water in the floods. Instead of just lowering the bladder on top, they can actually open up some gates and move more water through. So there'll be better regulation of the water coming through the dam. So that was all part of the whole process. The other thing is that the other more important part, I think, is we reached out to XL Energy, and hopefully somewhere down the road, we can count on them to be a partner in some of our endeavors. So with that, I was supposed to read that during the communication. I apologize. Appointment of ad hoc committees for aquatic plant harvesting and sedimentation of Tainter Lake. And just a point of clarification, and I hope I'm using the right term, but I use the term sedimentation because it's not dredging committee. The solution is dredging. The problem is sedimentation in the washing.
Sure.
And so dredging may or may not be one of the solutions that we come to. I'm not going to preclude what the committee would find as in their findings. The other thing is, I put together for the board, and we'll certainly share that with the rest of the group. I put together some expectations and communications, like Jim had talked about. These committees have a purpose and a time because they're ad hoc, they're not permanent. And it's pretty hard to put together a committee unless you know what you're really doing and what the board expects you to do. So I tried to put this together so that it made a little bit of sense. The other thing is, when we have these committees, usually there's another step. This is the first of one. And I guess from my standpoint, I would like to have some documentation from the committee as part of the deliverables. And the reason for that is as you build an argument for something, you have to have the data to support your argument. Well, part of the reason for putting these ad hoc committees together is to do that data mining. If we were like a township and we had a clerk, the clerk could do the research. Well, we have to do our own research. And so we need to document that. I just want to formalize that process a little bit more. The other thing is, because we are a public entity, all these meetings have to be posted, noticed, and in a place that is handicapped accessible. And I guess from my standpoint, would be nice also if the expectation were that there would be minutes from each of the meetings so that the rest of us that didn't attend could see what was going on. And that there is a written, there's some documentation that it isn't. What I would like is, as at the conclusion of this, that there's some event and where there is something given to us as board members that we can research through, because, you know, obviously some of us may go to some of these meetings, but then on the other hand, and so you're gonna have pieces, I'd like a comprehensive, some kind of a comprehensive report at the end. I don't want to sound like your English teacher and have to say that there has to be a term paper at the end, but we have to document this someplace because there is going to be a next step. It's much more efficient if we collect the documentation at each step and then have it together. The other thing is I put in ending dates. So for the sedimentation committee, I put in July 1. And then I also said unless extended by board action. I don't know. I pulled July 1 because it's 6 months, and I think at 6 months, we should say, okay, is it going? How's it going? And if it gives, I don't want it to be death by committee. And so it just goes on and on and on. So basically, we're not, I put down the purpose of the ad hoc committee to study the potential of removing and managing the sedimentation of Tainter Lake, because there's got to be a next step after, if whatever solution is, there has to be, it's going to be an ongoing the sand country north between here and Colfax is not going to change. And this study will include permits, permitting agencies, application procedures and processes, legal responsibility, environmental impacts and costs. The committee will post all meetings according to Wisconsin open meeting statutes, provide the Lake District Secretary with minutes following each meeting, provide a detailed report of the committee's findings and investigation results, and conclude this investigation by July 1, 2024, unless extended by board action. And that basically what I'm saying is, as a committee, I mean, if you're not going to get your work done, that's okay. We'll extend it. It's just that we want to know about it. And I just don't want it hanging out there. Does anybody have anything they want to add, comments or questions on those charges or expectations?
Sounds reasonable.
I think it all looks good. The one thing, and if you can just go through it quick. So if we form these ad hoc committees, and as we're doing research on the topic, it's okay for those committee members to be emailing stuff back and forth in a group, but you can't hit reply all or not. Is that
exactly
the rules?
right?
Okay, I mean, I just want to be clear because I don't want to do it
I
wrong.
had to explain that because again, it's a committee as part of a unit of government, which is what we are.
Right.
If you hit reply all, it becomes a walking quorum that is not a publicized meeting. It's really awkward to have to send either individual emails or just say, don't reply all. And then it's terrible.
It seems just
It
kind of
is.
inefficient, but there's probably a reason for it. I just want everybody in the crowd to understand, because that's something I never would have known until Al educated me.
Because if you do hit reply all, that means that you had like an unpublished meeting. And also means all your communications then subject to open records. And especially for the committee members, if they're using their personal email addresses, somebody could say, I want to go comb through your emails and find out, what communication was going on. Why they would want to do that on an ad hoc committee on sedimentation in Tainter Lake, I don't know. But
It'd be
they
pretty
could.
boring.
Yeah.
Well, remember Hillary Clinton and all the trouble she ran into? This is exactly what,
Don't get Hillary.
Yes.
Question, Jim, then the committee members are emailing you on the Tainter Lake org site. Is that correct?
No, we're doing like we do for like communication here on the board, but they're emailing directly. They're not, you're asking if they're clicking on the form on the website?
No, sir, I'm
Oh.
asking when a committee member would want to get a hold of you, they would go to the your Tainter Lake org, whatever it is, Jim at
Yeah.
Tainter Lake District.org.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
I would suggest, and this is the next discussion point on these committees, is that there has to be a member of this group on each one of these committees. I would say that the person on that the commissioner act as the central point, so that if people have questions, they send it to you. And then you can disperse it as opposed to sending it out to everybody else. And so it's clunky. I know it, but that's just the way it is.
Just
And-
want to play by the rules and make sure everybody understands
Right.
what that is.
And if
So-
the public has never used open meetings laws and rules, and you can run into, for example, if you wanted a form that you wanted to use Google Docs on, and so that everybody could fill in that form, that's actually an open meeting. And so you have to be really, really, really careful with those things. So anyway,
And it also, on the flip side of that, and I know it came up as a point tonight during public comment, we've been striving to be as open as possible and not do things behind people's back, meet in secret, or any of that stuff, which would be illegal anyway. But we're trying to err on the side of openness as much as even humanly possible when it comes to any of the communications that's going on with the district.
right. Good point. So the question is this ad hoc committee on sedimentation, is this something the board wants? Let's ask that question first.
My
I think
answer to
it's
that's yes.
absolutely necessary.
I mean, you guys asked me to put it on the agenda. I'm assuming that you wanted it, but,
Al, let me make a comment here.
What?
Going back to what Jim said about the Bowie Committee, that it's one of those things that obviously should become a standing
And I
committee.
put it up on the screen too, so.
Should we?
Thank you.
Should we make this a standing committee right from the start? Because this is one of the two main issues that we have at the lake, the sedimentation and the green. And I see this as an ongoing issue that.
I could see having it as starting off as ad hoc and then the determination of the committee. Because that's what the Bowie committee is basically already talking about. Is this is could be potentially an ongoing thing. So that could be the determination at the end of 6 months is this needs to be ongoing
Yeah.
because of,
Because as it's written here, it says it's to study aquatic plant harvesting and sedimentation, not to take action on, just to study it.
and I think your point is well taken, Pete. At this point, if we were an entity that had been around for 15 years, I would say yes, but, and when we get to planning, we're maxing out on committees and work. I don't want to burn this group out. And we're only 7 people and we can only do so much. And I would like to see us start out with ad hoc committees. And then if we think it's something that's in our wheelhouse, then we'll say, yeah, we want to take that on as a permanent committee. And that would just,
I have-
because then that formulates our workload.
I have no problem with that.
Okay, so, let's do it this way. Let's approve this. Let's approve the expectations first. If somebody would make a motion
I make a motion to approve the expectations.
for sedimentation, we'll get to the weed in a minute.
Second,
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to approve the expectations for the sedimentation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we have an ad hoc committee with those expectations. My next question is, who would like, as a board member, who would like to serve on that committee?
I'm doing buoys, I'm out.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do one of the two that are here tonight. So if somebody else would rather do this one. like
Grant,
for
what's
some-
your passion? Weeds or sedimentation?
Why, that's a deep question.
I know.
let me make a suggestion. How about Jerry?
About what?
How about Jerry Porter? Cause
Um,
he's already made connection with XL Energy, which may be helpful down the line.
I think we could add him. I'd like to talk to him first because he's not here. I mean, yeah, I've kind of shamed a couple of you into serving in some positions, but I'd really, at least I did it to your face.
Well, yeah, wait,
So.
I got the treasure because I made a comment at a meeting. If you don't show up to a
That's
meeting,
right.
maybe you should just get stuff.
Well,
No.
yeah.
I would volunteer to be part of the sedimentation one then. I think it's really interesting and there's a lot of layers to it, you know, like everything, like we talked about chasing these guys from shoreline erosion and I forget your name, but what you had brought up down to, you know, what our different options are. And I'm sure it's gonna be something that's gonna take quite some time to get through all the permitting and all of that kind of stuff, even to learn everything we'd have to do, but I will volunteer to be
Okay.
part of the sedimentation.
You want to do that too, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put 2 on that so that it may go a little longer and that way it won't burn you out.
Good.
Okay. You had volunteered last month, I believe, to serve on that committee. If there are other people in the audience that would like to serve on that
I
committee,
think Eric Peterson and, yeah.
okay. Okay, make sure that we get your names. Board members, I had asked you last month if to be thinking of some people to contact. If you would get between Tom and Grant. Tom and Grant, the names of those people and put that committee together and contact those people. Would that be okay?
Yeah, how many people are we aiming to have outside of us two as committee members typically?
You know my feelings on committee, right? Best committee is 4 people and 3 don't show up.
I can make the not showing up happen probably.
I would say 4 to 6.
Including
get-
Tom and I,
So
so,
if you get 4 people, 4 citizens, I think that's a pretty good representative group. On that,
good deal.
that would, the problem is if you get like 15 people, you're never gonna get, what'll happen is the schedules won't line up and you'll evolve or devolve to 4 to 6 people anyway.
Yep, no, I like those numbers. And then, so if we have ad hoc committees of 4 to 6 people, you'd have 50% of the board members or the committee members at a meeting to make a quorum, or is that only for us when we work?
Yeah, well, because you're not taking action,
Okay,
a quorum is 1 more than half. So if you have 6, it's 4.
gotcha.
But you're not taking any action. You're really doing things by consensus for the most part. I mean, formally you could take a vote. But you know, if you get a lot of derision or division, you may have to resort to voting, but I would see that most of it goes by consensus. Anyway. Okay, yes. Okay. So make sure
Pam
that,
Tainter,
that she gets that.
You
And
don't
just
happen to
because,
have any contact information or anything? Well, okay, all right. Well, then after the meeting, let's get that.
and then you can start to think about how you want to meet and do all of that sort of thing. Okay? All right. Weed harvesting is the next one on the agenda. I should ask, is there anything, any other discussion on the sedimentation? We're clear? Okay, moving forward. Again, the weed harvesting or aquatic vegetation removal. It's not weeds, it's aquatic vegetation, okay? And there again, the same thing, post the meetings. And then there's a study, this one I didn't think was quite so labor intensive, and I had a end date by June 1st. Okay. Now, it has all the same thing. I just changed the name basically and changed the date. So. Is there anybody that makes a motion to,
I'll make a motion.
okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, pick one of the two, Tom.
That was right on. That was good.
Oh.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to have a committee on aquatic harvesting. Aquatic vegetation harvesting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Who wants to serve on that committee? Okay, you're up, Chuck.
Okay, and I know for sure out in the audience, Adam Mux is interested in that too.
Okay.
and I'm not sure if anybody else is.
Anybody else want to serve on that committee? I can tell you this, if we clean up the lake, aquatic vegetation is going to be an issue. Because guess what? Aquatic vegetation is going to grow in clear water. That's why it doesn't grow on the south end of the lake. We don't have that problem because we're greener than you guys. But it will be an ongoing issue. The other thing is that committee, one of the things that you may want to spend just a little bit of time with is invasive species. We're fortunate because we don't have a lot of aquatic vegetation. We don't have a lot of invasive species because it can't grow in green water. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a little curly leaf milfoil or whatever. So I would invite you to do that. Both groups, I got this all teed up for you. Vegetation, if you call Alex Smith, he wants to talk to you about harvesting. Sedimentation, call Alex, but there's a Jacob, somebody or another at the DNR, and he's the dredging person.
Jacob, somebody from the DNR.
Yeah, call Alex Smith is our biologist, okay?
Okay.
And he is the one that has, I would encourage you to start with those two people.
Jacob and Alex.
Jacob and or Alex, one or the other, but one of the things that you're gonna want to do is you're gonna want to get the lay of the land before you start going too far. And so there's a lot of components out there, and so you're gonna want to have those. So if you'll have to go through Alex anyway, because Tainter Lake is in his region. But get one of the Alex for the vegetation and Jacob for the sedimentation. And that's where I'd encourage you to start. Strongly, I didn't put it in the expectations, but I would encourage you to start there because those would be good resources to start to pull together to see what your plan of work will look like. Okay,
Understood.
anything else? Okay, moving on. Work plan. Okay, I sent the board members a copy of the work plan. I did include in the work plan the part of the grant that we've written. And I also put in the ad hoc committees. Just so that you know, I looked at this, we have 6 more meetings before we have to start talking about the annual meeting. Yeah, that's why we have a plan of work, because, and the other thing is we have 4 committees going now. We have a committee on strategic planning and grant writing. We have a committee on buoy and buoy placement. We have a committee on sedimentation. We have a committee on vegetation and harvesting. We have a full plate. I would encourage us not to take on any more work until we get one of those deals off. For example, if you look at the strategic planning component, in January, February, and March, we're going to be meeting with constituency groups. In that grant, there is meetings, 4 to 5 meetings with people to get their opinions and pull those things up. Also, by January 15th, I would like to have the survey to all the residents of the lake. I would like to have a survey out to them. This is a pretty aggressive schedule. And the reason why I want to get it done, and so that we're not looking at it. I don't want to be at a meeting next year at this time talking about writing a strategic plan. I want it done. I want to have the plan. I want to have the people surveyed. I want to have people discussing what they feel is important. And I'd like to have all that ready so that we can start writing that plan by May 15th, so that we can have the plan done by the annual meeting. So it's going to take about, I figure, usually writing those plans take between 40 and 80 hours just to write the plan once you get all the data together. So I want to get those things moving. If you look at the ad hoc committees and the work that they have to do, like I say, we're full. And so I just want you to be cognizant of that as we go along. I'm going to start adding to this and as we do this. And so I'd like to do a monthly check-in on this stuff just to see how we're doing. So that is not an action item, but I just want you to be aware of that. And by the way, if those members committee, if you come up with something that needs to be added to the work plan, let me know and we'll just add it to the work. This is our work plan. It's, it's just a way to keep us organized. Okay. So, identification of potential speakers for upcoming meetings. I've learned, you have to be out 2 or 3 months for some of these people to get them to speak. I know Tom had suggested, Dr. Lathrop. He he did a lot of research on a lake that feeds into Mendota or Monona, one of the two. I can never keep them straight, but
It was actually Lake Wingra.
Yeah, but it feeds into Mendota, right? Or
Madison area.
Right. So anyway, they're an impaired lake just like us. And so it would be kind of interesting to get him on our agenda to speak just like we did tonight.
Yep. And he is an expert. He knows about Lake Tainter. His daughter used to go to Stout. So he has some familiarity and he's worked on projects with the same challenges as Lake Tainter. So he's retired, but he is willing to meet with us via Zoom.
Right. That's good because I have that as an agenda item for next month. I also have another topic. I got an email from somebody about healthy shorelines. There is grant money out there for that. Now, it may be kind of a promotional, self-promotional kind of thing, but I think might be worth looking into what healthy shorelines means and those kinds of things. So that was another topic that I had thought of. Does anybody else have?
I know we had talked about I know Adam Mux has made some contacts with different weed harvesting places that would be willing to come in and talk to us. But
Why don't we do that when more towards the end of the committee work?
okay,
And then that way we have a defined,
yep,
and
makes
so
good
then we
sense.
can push into that.
Makes good sense.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Anybody have any other items or ideas?
I have one other possible speaker, but I wanted to wait until tonight to determine if anyone else brought in possible speakers. And it looks like this one that I brought in might be the only, so I will contact the other one as well,
Okay. All right.
if that's okay.
Yeah, we'll contact them.
Yeah, I would like to, I want to wait for this meeting to see if this was a go or not, but there's a lake district, Cedar Lake. It's up by exit 10.
Yep.
Have a lot of problems similar to ours, and they've been in business for quite some time. And it's a 7-person board, 2 counties involved, believe it or not. And I would like to make a contact with them and maybe see if their president or very knowledgeable person would like to speak.
Is that Red Cedar Lake?
No, it's Cedar Lake.
Okay.
This New Richmond, Star
New
Prairie up
Richmond.
there.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. That reminds me, Red Cedar Lake, which is in the watershed. They also have a lake association that's very active. And they're doing a lot of studies on their own about, so that's, if you can't get Cedar Lake, then let me know, and I have the president of Red Cedar Lake would be another good one.
Yeah, they'd be interesting to talk to because they're not the headwaters of the Red Cedar, but pretty darn close to it.
Well, right now, they're studying the TMDL on the streams running into the Red Cedar Lake because it's high in phosphorus, but there's no agriculture north of there. And so they're wondering why. And so they actually, just as we're studying sedimentation, they're studying, why is this so high? So both of those would be good groups to get a hold of.
Yeah, there's probably no problem with having more than one, depending on if we don't have some speakers lined up, why not hear from a couple of other lake associations is hear what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah, makes total sense. I mean, they're going through exactly what we're gonna be going through. They already went through probably some of this stuff and
Yeah.
Well, and for those of you in the sedimentation group, once you reach out, I'm sure you're gonna reach out to Altoona.
Lake Altoona is right on the
And
top of my
so
list.
somewhere along the line, you're gonna probably bring one of their board members
Sure.
forward. So those are all good references and that adds to our knowledge base.
Sure.
Anything else on that? We got some really good ideas. I put them down in my notes.
How about shall I say, January, February, or March?
Whatever you can get them. The first one, if you lock somebody in and they can do it,
Let you know.
let me know, or let everybody know that you got somebody for that date. And we've been doing these meeting dates and it's at 5 o'clock. So figure from 5 to, I'd like to keep them at 40, if you shoot for 45 minutes, you'll hit an hour.
Yep.
But I think that we're only running about 5 minutes longer than we normally do, and so I think those are good things. But yes, Pete, lock them in for the meeting dates, 5 to 5:45, and when you get the first one to get the date, that's the date, and then, we can just push it around. Okay?
Okay.
And if they can do multiple dates,
Right, yeah,
just in case.
yeah, I'd push out I'd push out all the meeting dates and another one that would be good to have would be Bill James. But I want to hold off on that. I don't know that we're ready for that just yet. He's the big guru on the watershed in northwestern
Scout
Wisconsin.
Biology Department.
Yeah. And he's got a lot of contacts all over the state. And so he's no longer at Stout, but his lab's still at Stout, but he lives down south someplace.
He may have been a consultant on Cedar Lake, as a matter of fact.
I wouldn't doubt it if
Yeah.
so, but I don't know if we're ready quite for that yet. That's just my opinion. Okay, thank you for that input. Agenda items for next month's meeting. 2 items that I would like to put out for your consideration is I would like to put on the agenda approval for the expenditure for Survey Monkey and a Zoom account. They're written in the grant. We won't know until February or March if we're gonna get the grant. But if we're gonna put out a survey in by January, we're gonna have Survey Monkey. And the other thing is Zoom account. We need a Zoom account if we're gonna Zoom people in. We can't always ask Jim to use his account, and so we need our own account and those kinds of things. All right. And that's all I have to put on, and I had boat launch fees as something that we had talked about, possibly putting that on. Or is that something that we wanna?
I think we need to investigate first. That's why I brought that up to Chase to find out what department at the county's in charge of that, and whether or not, I mean, it's their ramps. And
You mean it
we'll
might be a
just
little,
put up a sign and start collecting money.
Right.
Sorry about that.
So is that another good potential speaker though?
County parks, because like you said,
Yeah.
those are all parks, so.
well, and Grant brings up a good point, would that be somebody from the county? Would that be a good discussion to have, or to bring him in as, be a speaker?
Whoever's in charge of the parks and whatever he said.
Yeah, and I can, since I'm on the county board, I don't have a problem with reaching out to whoever's head of the parks department and start that conversation. We could leave it as a potential agenda item. And it could be something where, it's like they're in this building, they could maybe pop down for a couple minutes in the meeting to talk about it.
I have maybe a name here. I contacted the county this spring about filling in that huge hole that was at Place Boat Landing. And they did get it done. It took them a little while, but they got it done. And the gentleman that I worked with His name was Scott Nabafield.
Yeah, he's on the facilities department. He actually lives out near Champney Park, as a matter of fact.
okay.
Not on the lake, but he's in that area. So
Okay, well,
Yeah, why don't,
I'll reach, I mean, if that's, I can reach out to Scott and ask him, and if not, he'll put me in touch with whoever that might be.
yeah, we'll put that on then as just a discussion and or action item, and not that we're gonna approve that, but.
At least have that discussion, yeah.
Right. We can,
so do you
just-
want it on there? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, I'll put it on there as a discussion item. Anything else we need to add? It's gonna be Christmas time, so,
Well, you want a survey by January,
yeah,
and we've got one meeting before now and before,
Yeah.
from now,
plus deer hunting.
plus deer hunting.
And on the plan of work, it's only 5% done.
I know. Well,
Do we, you know, I started writing some questions, but I don't know how that meshes with survey. I've never seen a survey monkey before.
okay. It's just a piece of software. I have a little bit of an advantage. I just got from Eric Olson, at, UW Stevens Point. I got from him a survey that they put out to lake owners around the state on, what they would like to see done in their lakes. And I haven't reviewed it because I just got it. But I think that would be a good place to start, because not only would it be good information for us to gather for here, we can push that against what other people are saying in other lakes.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of where I was kind of hedging my bets on some of that I might be able to shorten that up pretty quick. The other thing is Dr. Lee at Stout said that they have enough brain power if we got a survey together that I think we could convince them to review it to make sure that it's proper, you know, and we're asking the questions in the right way. And those kinds of
Could
things.
we maybe then put the survey, is this in a form that you could distribute to us on the board so we
Yeah.
can look at it and
As soon
maybe
as,
make some?
as soon as I look at it, I'll share it.
Well,
I,
okay, and then, and we can, you know, make some comments and.
yep, Yep.
And then, we might, maybe have it as an agenda item next time for a
Discussion.
semi.
discussion.
Yeah, I agree with that, Pete. We should talk it over
Okay,
next month.
Hear me discussion and possible action.
got it.
Good.
Anything else? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Before we do that, just a housekeeping note.
Yep.
Our April meeting. There's something scheduled here at the county that needs this room.
Okay,
So we were trying to figure out where they're gonna put us.
Oh.
And it might be in the room next door. We're trying to determine how many people are normally here, but we wouldn't have the microphones or any of that stuff,
But we probably wouldn't need them either.
possibly not, but then we also won't be able to record it or do any of that stuff. So
I think we can handle it. I think that would be
just,
good.
just a housekeeping note, that's all.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh,
Jim.
I'll make that note.
Otherwise, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
thank you.